Hello, I'm the fat suit that Chris Hemsworth wore in Avengers Endgame, and I'm here to talk to you about Spider-Man Far, Far Away, or as some people call it, Spider-Man Far From Home. No alcohol has been consumed in the making of this video. The first thing I want to talk about, and I need to get it off my chest before I get into this review, is I am a lifelong hater of Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't really have a good reason. I got forced to watch October Sky when I was a kid, and I hated that movie. I've rewatched it since. It's a fantastic movie.
It's a fantastic movie.
Thank you, Peanut Gallery. But for reasons unbeknownst to me, I hated him, and I still hated him. I couldn't shake it. This is the movie that changed it. This movie was phenomenal.
What about Brokeback Mountain?
I never saw Brokeback Mountain. Thanks for putting my ignorance on blast. Couple things I thought were really important for this movie. One, it was a Spider-Man as a teenager movie. Obviously, this is what Marvel and Sony have been doing with Spider-Man. Sort of post Tobey Maguire, which no one bought Tobey Maguire as a teenager. Sorry, Toby. And then, two, because they chose Mysterio as the villain. I think Mysterio is a perfect Spider-Man film villain for a number of reasons. One, you can one-off him. He doesn't have to show up again. Maybe in the Sinister Six or something. He's a perfect movie-length villain because he's all illusions. He's all mind games. You can spend the first half of the movie, like they do, thinking he's a good guy. Obviously, spoiler alerts. The second half of the movie, you know he's the good guy. He's the bad guy, but you can't get past his illusions because he's so complex. He has an army of drones that Tony Stark conveniently forgot about in every other Marvel movie. But we can get to that.
Fishbowl head. He had a fishbowl head.
His costume's cool. It's very accurate to the comic adaptation. It was really dope. And then at the very end of it, once Peter has mastered the Spidey sense, because I refuse to call it the Petey Tingle, or whatever the fuck they say in that movie. I do not accept.
I think it was a Peter Tingle.
Spider Sense is what it's called. It's alliterary. It's just better than Peter Tingle.
It was a good joke.
It was a good joke if you were making a porno. Peter Tingle.
That was the point.
Peter Tingle sounds like the elf in an Elf on the Shelf themed Christmas porn.
That was the point of the joke.
Anyways, at the end, once he masters his Spidey sense, he obviously dominates Mysterio because he has no superpowers. He's an ordinary human with a slightly sub-genius intellect. Perfect, amazing. If I have one complaint about Spider-Man so far, it's that Tom Holland's Peter Parker hasn't been shown to be the genius that Peter Parker is supposed to be. We had a moment like that in this film where he suddenly started talking about the possibilities of the multiverse, and like Quentin Beck tells him, "Don't apologize for being the smartest man in the room."
He's making the suit.
Right, I'm getting to it.
Okay.
It's delivered like, oh yeah, here's that unseen genius that you haven't seen up until this point. It's kind of disarming and annoying. In Homecoming, he was sort of the best player on their, what was that? Quiz Bowl, whatever it is. But you'd never really see him being that intelligent. You'd like to see him get that, which brings me to the scene on the plane with Jon Favreau's Happy Hogan, where he's actually designing the new suit, and it's very Tony Stark-esque. And as much as I don't want this generation, this version of Peter Parker to become Tony Stark Jr., that was a really, really cool thing to see, and I think this movie did a good job of distancing itself from that, especially with the contrast in the mid-credit scene where Peter is revealed to the world by Alex Jones, J. Jonah Jameson, once again played by the brilliant J.K. Simmons.
Fucking amazing.
It was fantastic. It was like InfoWars in the MCU. Revealed as Spider-Man. Peter Parker's been outed. It's a brilliant contrast to the end of the very first MCU film, Iron Man, where Tony willingly reveals himself, and it shows the contrast between what an adult who's ready to be a superhero is like. He's very much, I want no gray area. I am Tony Stark. I am Iron Man. My actions are mine. Boom. Versus Peter Parker wants to be Spider-Man and Peter Parker, and despite him being a teenage kid, that's not realistic. And Jake Gyllenhaal's Quentin Beck has just forced him into, even beyond the grave, which we hope he's not dead because he was phenomenal, into being, a public face, probably an enemy at this point.
Also, Tony was rich, and he could afford to make that fucking
There's that too. Peter's not rich.
He could be
Given
like,
all that,
I live in my mansion. Fuck you guys. I'm fucking Iron Man.
I'm gonna give this movie, out of 5 shots of bourbon, I will give it 4.5. It was fantastic. Mysterio brings a really cool visual aspect to the movie. You can't trust anything you see virtually the whole movie. The surprises are kind of predictable. You know what I mean? Like when he tricks him in.
The bar scene was good.
The bar scene was good. That one got me. But when he tricks him into thinking when Nick Fury is very much like, tell me who else you told, and then it's been Quentin Beck the whole time. You see that coming. The only flaws I see in this movie, there's a couple, and they're very minor. I hated Ned's story. Didn't care about it. I get that it's kind of like a teen film and they're trying to have fun with it, but it dragged on a little bit for me, and they layered it a little bit too much. They put too much on it. But I think, as I say it, it was a little necessary to ground Peter back. It was very good for him to ground it back to the safety of his group as a whole, rather than just worrying about MJ. And the only other issues I have are some plot holes that this movie brought up with Endgame, such as, in order for Edith, which is the funniest joke in the entire movie, even dead, I'm the hero. Thank you, Tony Stark. In order for that program to exist, Tony Stark would have had to have invented it and programmed it and designed it sometime during the events of Endgame, or maybe immediately before, which makes him not using it during Endgame, or maybe Infinity War, I guess. Really questionable.
In fairness,
what
would drones do against Thanos?
Distract? Occupy his army? I don't know. Seemed like a strange thing for him not to use. The bigger issue is that they very clearly show that the people that were snapped, or the blip as they call it, when they blip back into existence, the school band blips into existence directly on the court where they disappeared from.
It was a marching band.
Meaning everyone blips back where they were, which doesn't jive with Endgame, but I can be convinced that everyone blipped back in because Hulk snapped them in before the final Endgame fight, and then Doctor Strange and Wong teleported all of them back to the battlefield. That's fine. What it doesn't explain is what happens to people who were in an airplane.
Which they definitely show.
When the snap happened. Like, do they blip back into existence 35,000 feet above the ground where they were? And then they just fall to their deaths?
Yeah.
I don't follow.
Less of a disaster than the actual blip.
Sure, but surely not what Tony meant when he snapped his fingers. Is that fair?
Fair. Yeah, that's fair.
I think there's room to make some concessions there. Say, Tony said everyone is back and everyone's safe. Maybe that's what he thought. I don't know. Other than that, I have no problems with the movie. Thought it was fantastic. It's been the best Spider-Man villain that's been on screen so far. It narrowly beats Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2.
Yeah, man. Classic
movie.
Classic.
A movie that dragged Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker into stardom.
Peanut Gallery gives it a bag of peanuts and Cracker Jacks.
I think the biggest question from this film becomes, where do you rank Mysterio in the pantheon of Marvel villains? Because
also,
Marvel has struggled making some on-screen villains, but they've also hit some home runs. I think this is another home run. It's up there with Michael B. Jordan. It's up there with Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah.
Josh Brolin for me is number one because he's the most hyped up cinema character in the history of film.
True. And
he knocked it out of the park. Great. It was fantastic. I kind of feel like this is the start of Phase 4 more than it is the end of Phase 3. But
Sinister 6 ?
I think it's coming. There's been hints from Hiddleston and the directors that maybe Kraven the Hunter is the villain in the next Spider-Man movie. I could see it. I don't know who they would play, but I'm really excited for the future of Spider-Man specifically. I hope Sony lets Marvel keep using him.
I'll enter my headshot for Kraven.
Yeah? You want to be Kraven the Hunter?
Sure.
I'll be the chameleon. We look enough alike.
Alright.
I think that concludes this episode. I haven't had any alcohol at all.
Cheers.
Shouts to The Hook Studio for helping us make this, and anyone who was stupid enough to watch this.
Smash that like button, smash that subscribe, hit that bell icon.
Turns out I wasn't drunk enough. Oh wait, I'm getting a call from no one.